Trigger warnings have been a staple on college campuses for years now, advising students that classroom content might be in some way disturbing or upsetting. And now they're making their way to a theater near you. A New York Times story last week described signs posted outside plays and musicals across the country, warning of strobe lights, loud noises, violence, and sex. And some went so far as to include plot particulars in a spoilers section on their website and designated a safe space in the lobby where audience members could talk to counselors after the show. One reader responded to the Times, "You've got to be kidding. Maybe hand out blankets and pacifiers too." But others say the warnings are essential to protect victims of trauma. So, as the Times put it, to warn or not to warn, that is the question. And here were the answers, we hope. Our WGBH arts editor, Jared Bowen. Hello there, Jared. Along with Gail Dine. She's the president and CEO of the anti-pornography organization Culture Reframed. Gail, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here. We had this exact same discussion with you about classroom trigger alerts. You were in favor of them. You in favor of them here too?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because from all the research we know about trauma is that if you do trigger a victim of sexual assault, you are causing a tsunami of emotions that that person is probably may not be ready to deal with. So I think you absolutely have trigger warnings. How you have them and when you have them is open for discussion. But you have to respect the deep trauma of what happens to women who've been sexually abused, and you don't want to start that off unless they are ready to deal with it.
So you're the arts editor. How about it in the arts world? Yes or no?
Well, I have reservations about this. Before I saw the New York Times piece, it had occurred to me recently when I was in a theater and I saw the placard, and it listed some of the themes that you would encounter in this piece, but the themes revealed plot points, essentially. And if I'm not doing a feature story or I haven't done an interview, I'd like to go in completely unaware so I can have the experience wash over me. But by seeing that, I then knew what to anticipate, and it changes the experience.
How about that? It does change the experience.
Yeah, you know what, though? Women's lives come above and beyond people's right to enjoy art. And for me, and I understand that, but I think it's much more important, given what women have had to deal with from men, if some of the men feel like they get their experience spoilt in art, well, big deal.
So
We've had a lot more to deal with.
The only trigger alerts you care about are for women who have been sexually
well, that's because of the research on trauma, is that there's nothing else quite like sexual abuse in terms of what it does to the body, what it does to the limbic system, what it does to the neurons, and how it lodges itself in the memory part, the sort of what they call the dinosaur memory part.
But what if a woman or a man has great fear of black men, of Muslims? So where do you stop?
There is a stopping in terms of the research and how it impacts both the neurons and the limbic system. So no, I think we've got enough research to know what causes that. If they fear black men, that means they're racist, and they shouldn't be protected for.
So do you have any sympathy for this position at all? I understand you come at it obviously from a different perspective, but when you hear Gail talk about the women she's talking about, some of them you probably know, does that not crack your mind open a little bit?
Well, of course I have sympathy, and I think there are also different ways, and I think that this is what theaters are grappling with right now, is how do we deal with this so that we can honor artistic integrity if an artist has something that they want to share with you in a theater, in a communal space.
And keep our lawyers happy, they're probably worried about too.
Or perhaps put it on their website, so if somebody wants to do their research, they can do it before. But I will also say, Jim, having emotion and having that sort of attachment, and I am not the victim of sexual assault, I cannot speak to that, but I have had some of the most emotional experiences of my life, unexpectedly in the theater, because of encounters I've had, things that I've seen on stage, that I've lived and breathed with the actors.
Why wouldn't you have them anyway? Even with a trigger alert, why wouldn't you have them anyway?
Because then I'm anticipating it, and these are things that have snuck up on me and made for incredibly memorable experiences. And also, I will say, you look at playwrights who have often, throughout history, worked through their own issues, their own traumas, and then they are presenting them back to us.
You know, you've heard me say this before, because we've had this debate before, as I said, in another context. The thing I don't get is if there are trigger alerts, as you would like them to be, in classrooms like where you spent much of your life in the front of a room, and at a theater, how does that woman you're talking about deal with the non-trigger alerted world, which is 90% of what she has to encounter? She has to deal with that. But shouldn't she, if she has to deal with that, isn't it better to learn how to deal with it in the two settings?
But you don't learn how to deal. You see, what we know about
how do you
trauma,
learn to deal with it in the real world?
Well, first of all, if you're going to something, you stay away. A lot of people would stay away from anything like that. If they knew it was going to trigger them, they would stay away. For example, when I had certain classes on sexual violence, I would have a trigger warning, and I would say, if you have a history of sexual violence and you've not dealt with it or you're not ready to deal with it, do not come to class. We'll figure out something else in another reading.
But you're not answering my question. I walk down the street and I see a guy treating a woman inappropriately.
That's
I don't get a
very,
warning.
very different to
How is
reading
it-
an article about rape that explains the position of rape from the rape victim and from the rapist. We're talking about a much deeper level. Of course, that's probably going to send trigger warnings if she sees a man abusing a woman, but to actually read some of the stuff that we'll be reading in class, or to see a play right in front of you that has sexual violence on it, for many women, it will, as I say, it will cause a tsunami of
Did you
emotions.
see the recent Harvard study suggesting that, and they admit it's imperfect, but they believe it's credible, that in fact trigger warnings in many cases create greater anxiety in the recipient of the warning than
I'd need to
without
see the
warning?
study. No, I would need to see that. My sense is that could be true in the short term. Yes, but in the long term, it prevents, as I say, this tsunami of emotions coming forward. So I could imagine in the beginning, yes, it would get more anxious about what's coming up.
Could you craft a compromise with her? If there was a theater owner or a promoter right here, and he or she heard Gail Dines and then heard you, could you craft a compromise that would satisfy her, that would also satisfy your concern about, let's call it artistic freedom, for lack of a better expression?
I mean, I think one of the compromises, and I spoke to a speakeasy stage company here in Boston this week, which presents a wide range of plays, and I think they're looking at what they do and what they send out, materials that they send out to people, or what they put on their website. And again, if you want to have that unaware experience that you go in and make it fresh, then you won't encounter any of that. But if you do want to be educated, you do want to be aware, you do want to protect yourself, then you have that opportunity to examine exactly what mature themes will be dealt with in the work you're about to see.
We only have 15 seconds left. How about just leaving? No trigger alert. You don't like it?
Yeah, you
it causes
leave,
upset,
you're a
you
complete
leave.
mess, you've been triggered through the roof, and that has a domino effect on every part of your body. So no, that's not good enough. And you know what? Art doesn't cut any... We know what artists have done to women from time immemorial, so I've got no great love of art, male artists.
You'll have
in
to
many
answer
ways.
that sometime in the future.
Well, not
Sorry.
all artists.
No, of course
Gail,
not
it's
all
good
artists.
to see you.
Pleasure to see you as always.
Pleasure, Jared. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Talk to you soon. Appreciate it. Gail Dines, Jared Bowen.